Joel, Colin, thanks for being with us. So we'll call it an exit interview today, but a little bit different than most definitions of an exit interview. So Colin, November 1st, 2019, SmartAg acquisition by Raven was announced, and Joel, 2020 will be the 5th anniversary for your exit from Harris Vaccines.
Yep.
So Joel, maybe we'll start with you since yours comes first in time. Could you kind of walk us through the story of Harris Vaccines and some of the major milestones leading up to that exit in 2015?
Sure. So my father founded the company and spun it out of Iowa State based on some research him and his grad student was doing, Matt Erdman, in about 2006. And then in about 2008, I joined full-time. Mm-hmm. And the initial goal was to solve a disease in pigs called PRRS, which is porcine reproductive respiratory syndrome virus. It causes about $1 billion in losses to the U.S. pig industry every year. And the original goal was to have an R&D company and generate some vaccines and get bought by big pharma in maybe 2 to 3 years. What actually ended up happening was we had to prove not only efficacy of the vaccines, but also government approval and commercial acceptance. Mm-hmm. And so that took a lot longer than we thought. About 5 years in, we had our first product for swine influenza, and then in 2013 we were first to market for a coronavirus in pigs called PED, and then in 2015 we had our first vaccine in poultry for avian influenza, or the bird flu epidemic. Mm-hmm. And it was around that time that we then got acquired by Merck Animal Health in 2015.
So longer to exit, longer to product.
Longer, yeah, and we basically made a conscious decision to pivot from an R&D company to a fully integrated and distribution, commercialization vaccine company.
Okay, so business model ended up being different.
Yeah.
So Colin, if we can walk back from 2019 to kind of the history of major milestones for SmartAg, if you could highlight some of those for us.
Yeah, so SmartAg was really started around this concept of making autonomous farming possible, and there was a few key things that we felt like had to happen so that it could be broadly adopted within the industry. The first was having a strong ability to perceive what was around the machine, right? And detect obstacles, detect anything else in the field that we care about. The best way we found to do that was through deep learning and machine vision. And so that became one of the core areas of focus. The other two major things that we felt like needed to be solved was a communications architecture, so that even if you are in a cell-denied area, you can continue to operate and have good machine-to-machine communication. And then the third was really taking what was current day guidance, which was basically follow a line straight, and advancing that to a level where it could do a lot more. So go around different obstacles, avoid unharvested crop, navigate around internal boundaries within the field. And so those kind of became the core areas of focus. But really the problem what we were trying to solve was addressing what is a big challenge for farmers, which is labor scarcity, especially during harvest time. And so we focused on that. And in terms of milestones, I think kind of the very first milestone was we did a sort of a proof of concept with a customer, just to see if we could actually control his tractor and make it do some of the things that we wanted it to do. And so we did that in 2016, and that kind of gave us at least an idea of how to move forward and how to actually build a product that could be commercialized. Probably the next major milestone was in 2017. We held a demo for dealers, customers, and investors. And I think that was kind of the moment where there's a lot of people that have been on the sidelines paying attention to what we're doing because it's interesting, but we didn't really have any credibility in the space, right? I'm not a tech founder. I hadn't done this before. And so that was kind of the moment where we were able to show people like this is possible and we have the ability to do it. And I think that made a lot of believers out of, especially investors and even customers, and gave us some momentum to continue moving that project and product forward, and then ultimately put us in a position where we were able to raise, a Series A or a larger amount of funding, and get the product to a point where it was basically ready to go to market. And that's when, we had attracted enough attention within the broader industry that we had the opportunity to sell, and ultimately to Raven.
So a couple of common elements to your stories. One is it takes some time. Number two, the job of you as founders or co-founders is about trying in every way possible to gain some credibility. And so, Colin, you had founded another business, so I think you had some credibility, and certainly Joel, your dad Hank, had tremendous credibility and reputation in the pork industry, but when you start a business, it's almost like you separate yourself from that and have to gain credibility anew.
I think I created credibility by not being a scientist or a veterinarian. So my degree was in economics, and I think that was the balance that we had from the visionary and the scientists of my father, and we need to have HR in place, and more of the operations side, which was difficult. It's difficult to get that off and going as a startup too.
How to make a research vision into an operating business. Yeah.
I'd also point out, I remember the demonstration day, and I think you put an employee out in the field to test whether the tractor would identify them or not, and so putting
we had
your employees
literal skin in the game.
Yeah.
So that was your guy that was in charge of the safety features, right? Jumped out in front of it while it was moving. Yeah, it was a good effect.
Yeah.
But I still remember that I'd seen, of course, the same tractor pulling grain carts in the field before, but there was something striking about seeing it do that without a driver.
Yeah, and it with what we're doing, it's something you really have to see to believe. And so, videos go to a certain degree, but having people actually be physically there and witness it makes a big difference. Because it's a huge machine, and to see it do precisely what it's supposed to do repetitively helps people sort of build trust in that system, right? Because there's a lot of skepticism, I think, initially around autonomy and around surrendering control of a machine to a computer effectively. And so that was and will be one of the most effective ways we bring this technology into the industry, is by holding events and demos and letting people witness the technology in action.
Mm-hmm. Well, in my experience, after an exit, being acquired by a larger company, life changed in lots of ways. But Joel, Merck Animal Health, one of the major players in animal pharma, how did things change for Harris Vaccines? How did they change for you with some time to reflect on that?
The one thing I like to talk about is the arrival fallacy. It's this idea that once you've accomplished kind of your ultimate goals, you end up feeling this sense of loss, essentially. Or the other way I've described it is that it's kind of bittersweet. So it was an 18-month process where we went out into the market to get acquired. And so we talked to 20 companies, and that got dwindled down to 5, and then finally to 2, and then we went with Merck Animal Health. And so there's that kind of relief that process is over, because we're doing that and running a company. And then, day one, my father was out, and I think the next week, all of my reports were gone. I had a new boss pretty much every 3 months. There was a lot of restructuring in Merck at the same time. It's just kind of it's amazing to see all the resources you're able to utilize, and I was able to go to work for Merck Global out of New Jersey for a while to work on the global marketing strategy for our tech inside of Merck. So that was all really interesting and cool, and Merck's been a great partner to work with, and they've reinvested in our facility in Ames, and I think 80% of the people I hired are still working at Merck. I got a note from the person that I kind of trained to be our head of customer service, and it was like 10 years ago last week that she posted on Facebook that she got an internship at Harris Vaccines, and so she's been there ever since, And so that, to me, that's really awesome, that they've been a good partner. And yeah, and for me personally, I think when I went out to then figure out what I wanted to do next and get involved with like Startup Engine and some other things, it was surprising to me how few people have gone through this. They kind of need a help club or like some sort of group therapy type thing because it is. I mean, and I was really upset that we exited about a week after my 30th birthday. I was hoping we could do that before my 30th birthday, and missed it by a week. And so it's just all these weird, it's the only thing I'd done after college, and there's all these weird emotions around it. But it was good. I mean, looking back at it now, I think there were challenges immediately afterward, but I look at it now very fondly that it was good on many levels, both me personally, for my family's sake, and then for the employees as well in the community.
Yeah. Well, interesting insight. So I guess, Colin, welcome to a club.
Yeah.
So you're not even 2 months into post-exit life with Raven, but how's it going so far? What are your observations?
Yeah, I mean, it's different, but it's new, right? So I probably don't know the full aspect or scope of the change yet, but there's been a lot of things that are really positive so far. One is that Raven so far has been a great partner as well, and they've retained everybody from SmartAg, and for the most part, not a lot has changed operationally, especially from a R&D and engineering standpoint. The reporting structures, obviously changed some. I report outside of engineering, and engineering reports up through Mark to, director of engineering there. So things have kind of shifted, and there's an integration happening now with our technology and Raven technology, and the process is very intensive, and I think it's a little bit overwhelming to me just because of the number of people that are now involved, right? So it used to be we basically had, I don't think as a founder you truly appreciate how many jobs you do, or even as a startup employee, you don't probably understand the total scope of the hats you're wearing, but you're wearing way more hats than you probably think. You just, a lot of hats you just don't even pay attention to. You just do whatever needs to get done. But now that we're part of this larger organization, we've got very specific people that do very specific things to move everything forward. So what's been cool to me is to see now what started out really with me and a couple engineers in a cornfield working on this to now there's over 100 people dedicated, basically full-time to autonomy within Raven and the people from SmartAg combined. So that's pretty cool to see.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fun experience to see, that idea expand and have so many passionate people behind it that are really excited, and that's one of the things that I give a lot of credit, and makes the transition to Raven really exciting, is that they're all in on autonomy. It's a big part of where they want to go in the future, and they have commitment, from the highest level all the way down to the people that are doing the day-to-day work. So that's exciting, and I'm excited about the future. But I have plenty to learn still in this big company environment, so I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes.
Well, we look forward to watching you become a company man.
Yeah.
So I've always found it interesting that entrepreneurs that aim to tackle really big problems, which both of your businesses obviously did. I mean, really big problems. It just takes a tremendous amount of resources. And so you're asked to communicate simultaneously a couple different things. One is that you're fully committed and all in to making this business happen. Especially when you start asking other people for their money, but really, even when you ask your first engineer, even if it's volunteer, for their time. Follow me, the two most important words in the English language are what are first used by founding entrepreneurs. But you're asked to provide that full-time commitment, and when you bring in investors at the same time, be able to point to some sort of an exit that seems plausible, even if the early predictions don't end up being right. What does it take to balance effectively those two seemingly oppositional goals for, other entrepreneurs that are out there working perhaps even today trying to do that effectively?
Yeah, it's, one thing that I thought we were doing that was really unique, and I'd be curious if you were like this as well, but we were very upfront with all the employees on day one that we were going to get acquired. It was Hank and I, we were not in it to build a legacy company. It was to basically to stop commoditizing animal health and to utilize advances in human medicine and apply it to the livestock industry, because the technology was 50 years old and nobody uses 50-year-old technology for anything. And so, so day one, we're telling employees that you're going to get acquired. Now, this would create an interesting culture of people that, were excited about that, because we would give out options and stuff like that to try to attract new employees and good employees. We also lost a lot of good employees because I think they worried about the sustainability of the company. We had 2 layoff rounds in the 8-year tenure. There were issues, when we did make the pivot from a research-focused company to a commercialization type company, there were people in R&D that didn't like that and went to more research-focused companies, and so, but I think you have to be very upfront and transparent about it, because when you're taking investor dollars, especially on the VC side, that's all they want. They don't care that they don't necessarily care all the time that you're tackling this big problem. They want their money to turn into multiples of money, right? And so that's just the reality of it.
Yeah, I think the approach that I always took was making it very clear that at some point we would have to have liquidity, so I think that can come in multiple forms, but I always was pretty upfront with most people and said, that'll most likely be through an acquisition. Some other company will want to buy us, but I was also, I guess, very clear about what we're trying to do and why that matters, and the acquisition is a result of that. It's not, we're not doing this. Our goal is not to build this technology to be acquired. Our goal is to build this technology, solve a real problem, and then hopefully that results in enough value for us all to walk away happy someday if we choose to. So it's more of a secondary effect of us doing our jobs well. And so I think that's an important balance for companies to take. And I think if we look across the startup sphere, we see a lot of companies that sometimes overhype stuff to present this illusion of a certain state that they're at, really just to get it sold. And it's not good for the economy, it's not good long term for investors, and especially not good for employees, right? If you get bought and all of a sudden everything that a company just thought they bought just goes up in smoke and mirrors, it's not what it was really advertised to be. Heads are going to roll at some level, and so that's just not a sustainable way. And I was always very clear that, we were going to build this technology in an extremely sustainable way. We're going to do it right, even if that meant taking longer than what we thought initially, which it did. I was just looking back at an old presentation that I put together right kind of at the founding days of the company, and I was laughing at how ridiculous my assumptions were, and I thought they were conservative at the time, and I told people that too. So, but it ended up taking probably 2 years longer to reach certain milestones than what we wanted, just because of we had a tremendous amount of scope, but to do it right and to build it in a way that's safe and reliable took a lot of time, and that you have to be prepared to do that, I think, if you're gonna sustainably exit a company.
Well, I think working on big problems, technology with significant risk and a lot to figure out, pioneering not just in this industry, but, well, at least in this industry, but pioneering generally as well. And then, timelines, it just points to eventually, as a scrappy startup, you can get a lot done that large companies can't do effectively, but at some point, you just need a lot of resources to cross the finish line on certain things. And so having big companies involved in whatever way seems like it's probably a necessity.
Yeah, we were kind of at a point where we had grown. We were in the Inc. 5,000 fastest growing companies, and we'd grown over 450% in a year or something like that. And it was kind of like, well, do we go and raise a huge round of capital and take this to the next level? Because at this point, I was managing distribution in all of North America and Southeast Asia and other places and stuff. And then, or do we find a strategic and leverage that? And so I think that's a critical point when you've at least started to address the problem that you're tackling, and you're seeing some commercial viability in there and feedback that it's actually having an impact. So I know that you guys kind of went through that kind of decision point as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it was kind of an interesting decision for us. We had to look at the exact same thing. Do we raise a bunch of money and take it to the next level, and also kind of balance so a lot of the resources we need already exist, right? Distribution networks, and in Raven's case, actually a lot of complementing technology that supports the autonomous technology. And so for us, that was it kind of became, we're going to have to raise a lot of money just to create things that already exist and that are not really, we're not pioneering anything, we're just doing it so we can scale. And we can also partner with somebody or be acquired by somebody that has all those resources and can take it to the next level. And it also takes the risk off the table, right? Because frankly, just because you're bigger doesn't mean your odds of success are necessarily any higher, right? And there's a lot of things we had to solve for still, and the amount of risk we were taking on was actually probably going to increase as we scaled. And so that's fine for certain companies, and certain VCs are actually promote that to a degree. It's like, you're going to take a lot more risk to scale this, and that's okay, because you're either going to make it or you're going to break it. And, at the end of the day, they only need, a few companies in their portfolio to actually make it. And we didn't want to, it just didn't seem like the right decision for us. And so we made the decision probably definitely earlier than what I anticipated. We got to the point where it just made sense to really get serious about a strategic, and the ultimate path to that was obviously through acquisition. So
I think I was thinking about it when we were talking about how as little as 5 years between or 4 years really between our acquisitions, how the environment has changed. I think that I saw they did this the last 10 years of tech, and unicorn didn't really that term for $1 billion startup came into fruition around 2013. So we were already fully into it. You guys are just getting started, and so I think it's interesting that we kind of came to the same decision point of going with a strategic and exiting at whatever stage we were at. But the environment's just completely different in such a little bit of time, and it makes you it influences you more, I think, than just the internal things you're dealing with.
And I hope maybe for ag tech, the whole overall environment for exits is friendlier. I mean, because I can tell you in the 1990s with my first company, it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one particular experience where a large industry player who is still around, essentially stated to us, and it wasn't that we were looking to be bought by them, but they were going to spend whatever it took to try to replicate what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Rather than acquiring us.
Mm-hmm.
And we hadn't even brought up the idea, right? I mean, but anyway, my thought at the time is our industry compared to other industries when it comes to accepting that there's some point where it makes strategic, financial, and everything else sense for the large companies to acquire an early stage business that does make sense. And it seems like agribusiness wasn't so accepting of that. So I hope we're in a better place today.
Yeah, no, I think so. But I still, there are those cautionary tales of the balance between patents and trade secrets, because the patents are out there and they have the resources and people to figure out ways around it. And there's been so much buying and selling of each other in the last 100 years in some of these ag companies as well, and so it's an extremely small space, even dealing on the animal health side and more on the row crop side. There's so much crossover too.
So entrepreneurship scholars, I'm not sure if they do things that are very useful, but one of the things I found useful at least is that there's quite a big literature on describing entrepreneurship as a process, breaking it down into its different components. And so it's useful for me with students. It's useful to me from a reflective perspective to think about which parts of that process I'm good at and which I'm not, to try to help entrepreneurs understand that. But at any rate, one of the articulated parts of that process is harvest rewards. And rewards, of course, can be much more than financial, and they are. Otherwise, nobody would do it because it's just too hard, I think. But for both of you, you had exit events that were financially good for you, good for your team, good for investors, and you both did very well spreading out kind of who harvested those rewards. How do you think about the financial and sort of the reward part of the process, and what does it change, if anything, for you personally, for those that you work with, for investors?
I mean, I think, I don't know, it's kind of probably a little early to know everything that it can change, but one of the things that I've already started to appreciate is the change in, or the shift in responsibility, right? So going from being responsible for, essentially the livelihood of 20 people and a bunch of connected people, and being responsible for returns for investors and our customers' success, and having all that responsibility ultimately boil up to you is a lot, and that's a lot for anybody to be in that environment for a long time. I first started, my first company was in 2013, and so it's been 6 years, and so one of the things that I've appreciated, and at least initially, is I guess you could say the reward of not having to worry as much, right? Just knowing that there's other people that are there to can also take ownership and also take responsibility where it typically was left up to me, and so that's nice, and I think it's not a permanent thing, right? But it's something that at least you can appreciate the kind of the contrast between the two environments, and life is seasonal, and I think there's seasons to take on those responsibilities and do that and own that and appreciate that, and there's a lot of benefit to that, but there's also seasons to sit back and to kind of take count and appreciate not having all those responsibilities, and so I don't intend to be in like an environment where I don't have responsibility forever, but I think most people wouldn't like that. But I think that in terms of the financial benefits of it, I mean, it provides a level of security that you didn't have prior, and I've never really had that going into starting a company. So it's kind of a nice benefit there as well.
Mhm.
But so yeah, I don't know. To be determined on some of that, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also weird when so exiting and then actually leaving the company too. So I left a little over a year after exiting or left Merck, and you kind of look back and how I'm still able to connect with the people that I worked with all those years ago. The fact that it was 4 years ago and people in the community are still like, against all of Merck's efforts, they still refer to some of the products as Harris products, and so there's just, I kind of agree with Colin. I mean, even though it's been several years, it's still hard to totally see the ramifications of everything that's gone on. My whole thing now is how do I help, or and with Colin coming into the Ag Startup Engine in the early days too, is like, how do I try to help my experiences and share those with other founders so that they avoid the headaches that we went through.
Well,
I find that to be the most rewarding thing,
yeah.
really. So.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking about it earlier, but probably one of the biggest rewards is the experience. Right?
Yeah.
And
that not a lot of people get.
Not a lot of people get it, but I mean, experiential learning is the most effective kind, and because it can be extremely painful at times and extremely rewarding too. But having those, feelings, those emotions, baked into your mind just lets those lessons never be forgotten, I think, and that's one of the things that I kind of, after doing this twice, SmartAg on a much bigger level, looking back and thinking, I've kind of got 2 4-year degrees in how to found and grow a company, and that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And that, not a lot of people have that, like you said.
Yeah.
And I think being able to share that with other people trying to start companies, whether supporting them financially or not, but that's a cool position to be in, and I think part of receiving rewards is also being able to give, right? And I think that's something that this opportunity, this exit, the experience as a whole allows me to give in ways that I couldn't before, right? And that's probably more rewarding than any of the material aspects that come from it. So
yeah, I had a student interview me and ask what drives me, and I'd never tried to articulate that before, but probably should do that after a time. But I essentially told her I like to create new things, and I like lasting relationships with people.
Yeah.
And so if you do it right, as an entrepreneur, those two things should result. And as I've watched what's happened with the Ag Startup Engine, SmartAg, Colin, you being the first investment, Joel, you helping get the thing put together, and mentor our entrepreneurs like Colin. I think financial part of it is certainly nice, and that's what a fund is about, but it's about creating new things and creating really great relationships. And so whether it's I watch the relationship between you two guys or the relationship between our portfolio company entrepreneurs, that's a really good part of it.
absolutely.
The best interview question I've heard lately is you're getting interviewed for a job and they ask you who's your biggest competition. So someone asked me this for this fund that I now also work with, and my response was that if you want someone that's kind of gone through the internship to climbing the corporate ladder to go through all this stuff, like if you want that type of an individual for this role, that's my biggest competition, because I didn't do that. I didn't get an internship. I didn't do the checking all the boxes and that type of stuff. So I like to Colin's point, it's a completely different educational course pack of mostly the real world.
Yeah, and this is, even challenging to talk about at a university because you can have lots of people who can be valuable mentors that come from a lot of different places. But quietly, at least, my observation is that people who've done it, who've started a business, who've been able to navigate the significant challenges that come with that, bring through experience something that's very exclusive to that club.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, like, as a founder, those were the types of mentors that I needed, because I mean, there's the textbook version of a startup, and you can read all day and you can learn everything technically about how to fund a company and generate an idea, but where you'll get thrown off is the relational side of it. I mean, business is people, and that was a huge thing for me to learn is, the leadership that it takes, the emotional aspects of, and the dynamics of relationships as they evolve and as risk fluctuates, right? Because there's certain times in a startup's life where you question the future, really question if you're going to survive.
Yeah.
And that can be extremely hard. It's emotionally tolling, and I think that aspect of it you can't teach in a textbook. You can't. You almost just have. You have to gain that experientially, and or through a mentor that has gone through it and can share some of those insights with you. And so, I think that to me is a pretty unique aspect of the experience required to continue to be successful.
Yeah.
I always say it's a great education, and if you do it right, it'll actually, instead of paying for it, you'll actually get paid to do it. So
Yeah.
you get paid to learn that. But
Well, thanks, guys, for a great conversation.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
thank you.